Welcome everybody to today's video, and thanks for coming. So, today we'll be talking about Les Miserables or Les Miserables and what is lost in the English version of Les Miserables, the musical. So, let's get into it. Before we actually start, I just want to read to y'all the preface to Les Miserables, written by Victor Hugo, of course, so that we can see exactly what he was trying to accomplish in his book. Okay, so I'm not going to read everything, but you can just pause the video to read through it. I've put in some words in bold or in different colors that I believe are the most important. That it's the law and customs that of our society that artificially create hells on earth, and the three main problems of our time would be the degradation of man through pauperism, poverty, the corruption of woman through hunger, and the crippling of children through the lack of light. Okay, so as long as ignorance and poverty exist on earth, books like Les Miserables will be useful. Okay, but specifically, we're talking about the things that were lost in the English translation or the English version of Les Miserables, and I have three specific ones. But today, we'll only be talking about the first one and the third one, maybe. So, what is lost? The English version of Les Miserables loses specific French cultural terms and ideas that situate the work in the 19th century France, changes or distorts important characters, namely Javert and Fantine's, personalities and motivations, and puts an undue amount of emphasis on religion and Christianity. So today we'll be looking at the very popular song "Do You Hear the People Sing?" or in French "À la volonté du peuple," which literally means "to the will of the people." So I have here on the left side the original French. In the middle is a direct English literal translation, basically word for word a literal translation, and the English version made by Herbert Kretzmer. So, just to start, the English version is beautiful. The lyrics are very good, and the English version is so good that it's actually become the basis of basically the majority of translations of Les Miserables to other languages. Also, the translation is so good, the lyrics are so good, the words are so meaningful to a great amount of people that these are normally the words that are sung even up to now in so many different places, like in China. Sorry, not China. Like in Taiwan, in the Philippines, in so many different places that you kind of wouldn't expect. But it just shows how emotionally effective and strong these words are. But there was something that was also lost in the translation or the English version because it became so universal and so applicable to any context that it lost its original context, which is 19th century France. So the original lines translated directly to English are "to the will of the people and to the health of progress. Refill your heart with a rebellious wine, and to tomorrow, faithful friend. We want to create a light despite the obscurity of the night, in order to illuminate our land and to change our lives." So, to the will of the people. So, in politics or in history or in sociology, but mainly in politics, I guess, the will of the people is an important concept created or conceptualized by Jean-Jacques Rousseau in the social contract, where the will of the people is manifested when people act in accordance to the good of all of society and not just particular groups or not just the individual. Okay? And it's only and a government that is run through and by the will of the people, that's the only government that's actually legitimate. So a monarchy would not be legitimate because it's run by royals who care more about their own specific interests or the interest of the court than the interest of the whole society, the whole people. Also, indirectly, it's also an attack against, I guess, traditional the traditional church because they also act according to their own specific religious interest. So the will of the people is a specific word that would transport us to the context of Rousseau and the Enlightenment. And speaking of the Enlightenment, we also have another line here, basically the second half, where they want to create a light despite the obscurity of the night in order to illuminate our land. So what we see here is the influence of Enlightenment thinkers like Rousseau, because during this period they wanted to move away from the darkness of ignorance and the darkness of the church and superstition and tradition. That's one of the main reasons why the world isn't as good as it could be. So that's the Enlightenment period, and we can really see it in the lines here. Unfortunately, those aspects weren't transferred in the English version. Although the English version is very nice, it just doesn't touch upon those interesting facts. So you might be asking yourself, what is the significance of knowing all this? Well, what's the significance of anything really? But if you'd ask me, the significance of all these things about Les Miserables is that we can get a better insight on the people behind the barricade, the students, the lawyers, Marius, Enjolras, Grantaire, Courfeyrac. We can get a better idea about what they were fighting for because we know exactly what they're studying, because they're citing Rousseau, they're citing the general will of the people. And so instead of them just being random revolutionaries or random protesters fighting for freedom and liberty, we have a much more clear picture of who they are and what they're doing and why they're fighting and what they're fighting towards. And here we also have the reprise of Do You Hear the People Sing in the end. So it's important to note that actually in the original French version of Les Miserables, the ending is just when Valjean passes away, and there's no reprise of Do You Hear the People Sing. Okay, so this actually isn't the original French anymore because this was made after the English version was made. So this is actually a translation of the English version. So let's see. So in the English version of the reprise, the song starts with, Do you hear the people sing? Lost in the valley of the night, it is the music of a people who are climbing to the light. For the wretched of the earth, there's a flame that never dies. Even the darkest nights will end and the sun will rise. So here we can see a lot of religious symbolism here, like lost in the valley of the night. This evokes Psalm 23, which says, Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Also, this line here, who are climbing to the light, that really makes it feel like these people are going towards heaven. So very religious. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't think it was really the original intention of the musical to have that religious tendency. And in the translation, which I guess is better to call it a retranslation, we don't really have anything related to the religious symbolisms here, as you can see here in the direct English translation, which is something that I actually made. So it's not really that legitimate, I guess, or that good, but it's just more or less a very literal translation. Okay, so this is the first verse of the reprise, but in the second verse, it's even more overtly religious. So they will live again in freedom in the garden of the Lord. They will walk behind the plowshare and they will put away the sword. So obviously the first line, live again in freedom in the garden of the Lord, very religious. It specifically names God, the Lord, and also the Garden of Eden. But also this metaphor here that they will walk behind the plowshare and they will put away the sword is also very religious, and it comes from the Bible. So I think this is from Isaiah 2 verse 4. So, and in this verse it reads, He shall judge between the nations and shall arbitrate for many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nations shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. So basically in the future, when everything's right, there'll be no need for violence, there'll be no need for swords, and we'll be living in sort of paradise. Okay, so that's in the English version. Very religious, nothing wrong with that. But in the French retranslation, actually, it none of the symbolisms here again. So, and the good thing about this translation is that it keeps in line with the original à la volonté du peuple. Okay, because here, if we go here, it calls again to the first line, to the will of the people, whose voice will never be stifled. Okay, so it still goes back to the term of Rousseau, the will of the people, and and it talks about the light, to create a light in the obscurity of the night in order to illuminate our land. So it still evokes that enlightenment feels, and yeah, so that's about it. I just wanted to use this song, "Do You Hear the People Sing?" A very great song, very beautiful song, and to show that the translation really changed a lot of it, made it a lot more universal, lost its specificity to the French setting, and also these French thinkers, Rousseau, and also veered away from the metaphor of light versus night, which is very important in the Enlightenment period. As something that we take for granted, I guess, in a way. And yeah, so that's about it for this first video. In the second one, I think we'll be talking about how the English version of Les Miserables changes or distorts important characters, and the two ones that we'll be looking at will be Javert and Fantine. So if you enjoyed this video, please just go ahead and watch the next one.